Hi everyone, I'm Arum. I'm an assistant professor of classics at the University of Arizona, but I'm coming to you today wearing my hat as the co-chair, one of the co-chairs of the Asian and Asian American Classical Caucus, the AAACC. And I used to be a high school and middle school Latin teacher myself, and I'm pleased to be talking to you with Annie Huynh, who is the AAACC secondary school liaison and a public high school teacher herself. So Annie, can you tell us what are we talking about today and why?
Yeah, so we're here to talk about how to introduce classics stealthily into high school classrooms. And this is coming from a place because I'm currently teaching at a school with a Latin program that is being phased out. It got cut. So I'm taking on teaching 2 English classes myself. So these are things that I've thought about, hopefully things that I can implement into my own classrooms this fall.
Great. So why exactly is teaching Latin by stealth like a diversity, equity, and inclusion issue? Like, why is it important for us to be able to do this to promote DEI?
Okay, so there's no inherent value in one subject over another. There's classics is not, the most important thing. And this is truly coming from a place of just my desire to continue to teach Latin and classics because it's something that I love very much. But we also have to look at the fact that schools that do have classics or Latin courses, specifically middle schools and high schools, tend to be wealthier, tend to be privileged. And a lot of these underprivileged communities don't have access to Latin or the classics. So classics is already kind of in this exclusive little bubble. And if we want the field to become more inclusive and we want to diversify the field, then we have to create outreach to these underserved communities, because a lot of students just don't know that this exists.
Yeah, that's a good point. So it's not really about forcing Latin or classics on anybody, but it's just about creating opportunities to take Latin or classics for people who may not normally have those opportunities, right?
Absolutely.
So, yeah, so Latin is being phased out in your particular school. So what ideas do we have for continuing to have a Latin presence in the other subjects that you'll be teaching? First of all, what will you be teaching instead of Latin?
I'll be teaching 10th grade English.
Okay, great. And so is your plan to just forget about Latin forever then?
No, definitely not. I think there are a lot of kind of almost smaller disciplines within Latin that you can include into English courses. Things like a very strong understanding of grammar. But root words is another one, but also learning about different perspectives. So specifically the curriculum for 10th grade English where I work is on ethnic literature, or they like to call it point of view literature. And that's to introduce different points of views to students. And we can always introduce historical point of views. That's another way that you can include Latin or the Roman world into curriculum. Storytelling and myths is always a really great way to include classics as well. Do you have any ideas?
Do you have control over your curriculum?
I do. So I'm very lucky. I'm at a school that gives me almost full control over my curriculum as long as I hit the standards.
Okay, great. So you can assign whatever texts you want, as long as at the end of the year, students get whatever.
Yeah, there's a list of approved texts as well. And there's a list of books that the school actually has. So it's not like I can just choose a random book. It has to be something that the students can have access to. So along with those texts that the school provides, I'm always able to give an article or give a short story that I find or give a myth or something.
Okay, great. And are there particular like stories or myths that you'll want um, to introduce to sort of keep Latin or classics alive in your English classroom?
I've been thinking about this, and this is also something that I definitely have to run by my department head, but and if we're working with different points of views, I really enjoy the retelling of stories from different perspectives. So we have these myths that are always told, mostly from the male perspective, but there are books out there that retell the stories from other characters' perspectives as well. So I'm thinking specifically of the Penelopiad by Margaret Atwood, which retells the story of Homer's Odyssey through Penelope's perspective, which is really great because students are introduced to parts of the Odyssey in ninth grade English anyway. And so to have this kind of reframing for them would be really, really great.
Yeah, and it's a really good way to both introduce the original myth, I guess you could call it, and then a retelling, but also just to talk about like how stories can be like shaped and reshaped over time, right? From antiquity till the present day, right?
Right.
So,
and then see the differences in how, obviously it's not actually Penelope, right? But it's interesting to see how the story can be so different based on who's speaking, based on who is the narrator.
Right. And that seems to really fit in with the what you were saying earlier about the curriculum, the different perspectives kind of approach to the English curriculum, right? Like bringing in all these like multiple viewpoints and perspectives. So that's kind of one way where like classics really can converge with like a DEI focus, right? In that we can use classics or retellings of classical myths to encourage, looking at things from other people, someone else's point of view, right?
I also really like using myths and other stories that we tell based on Greek and Roman legends as a way for students to think about their own stories and think about ways to reframe certain events in their lives. And of course, this is totally up to them and how much they want to share, because I never want to push a student into a zone where they're so uncomfortable. But I've done this activity before with my Latin students, and some of the stories that they're more willing to share because they can find some sort of connection with another story that they've heard about, they become very powerful tools.
Yeah, this is a really sort of culturally responsive way of teaching that you're talking about, then, like not forcing, but encouraging students to bring their own perspectives and live experiences into the material, right? And bring them to bear on the material, right? And this is a great thing to do with classics. It doesn't have to be done only with classical sources, right? But classical sources are just as good as any for encouraging, taking multiple perspectives, right?
And I'm not the first to do this, and I won't be the last to do this. This wasn't my, own original idea or thought. There's lots of people out there that take myths and do something powerful with them.
Yeah.
I'm thinking specifically, this all started specifically because I saw the Medea Project, which is a group of women created by, this group was created by Rodessa Jones, and she works with incarcerated women and HIV positive women. And they use these myths to heal and to retell their stories and to process what happened. And I saw the power in that. And I thought, well, these kids have experiences that some of us can't even fathom, right? And it's giving them a platform to be able to talk about it.
Yeah. And it helps them to understand their experiences, but it also helps us understand the stories if they're willing to share how their experiences have informed their understandings of the text, right?
Right.
So, and all of this can be done outside of the sort of structure or confines of a formal like Latin classroom,
Absolutely.
right? So all of these strategies can be deployed in non-Latin classroom settings, which, for better or for worse, is kind of increasingly the reality of how we have to bring classics, how we can introduce classics to populations that might not have, might not have had exposure to classics. Right?
I actually have a friend who became a classics major because she started reading the Percy Jackson series and fell in love with it. And now she's a classicist.
Yeah.
And it's little things like that, reading these stories or having access to something that you didn't even know existed. And of course, the end goal isn't to create more classics majors. It's not ever a goal. It's nice when they become classics majors, but it's not, my main focus here. But it's nice to see that students are being exposed to a world that they didn't even know existed.
Yeah. So yeah, it's really all this sort of Latin or classics by stealth stuff that we're talking about. It's really about just creating more access, right? Like, access to content that may be inaccessible in many ways, right? So again, we increasingly have to, this happens at the college and university level too, right? Our Latin classes, our Greek classes are shrinking all the time, right? But our classics programs, this isn't the case for everywhere, but often our classics programs are thriving. And so then it's just a way of, bringing Latin into a non-Latin class or whatever, right? Or bringing Greek into a non-Greek class.
I also think that classics, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I also think that classics could use a little bit of a revival. And I think for so long, the field has been very much one way. And I think the inclusion of a lot of people who who didn't necessarily have access to classics originally, those points of views are so valuable and so important to making sure that the field is progressing and is changing and is moving in a direction that can mean its survival in the future.
Yeah, exactly. So it's really just about like creating opportunities where it doesn't look like there are opportunities, right? So we can always create opportunities to teach Latin or classics, even when it seems like those opportunities are being taken from us, right? So yeah, in your case, it'll be in the context of an English classroom, right? And you've mentioned this a little bit, but in addition to the stories, which will be your primary focus, you can also talk about, just even like small things like vocabulary, right? Like this English word comes from this Latin word. I mean, you can do that with pretty much, well, as we know, we can do that with like 60% of the English words, right? So words in English. So it's just about creating all these different tiny little entry points, but entry points nonetheless, right?
Yes.
And so, yeah, hopefully the people watching this conversation will be inspired to introduce Latin or classics in all sorts of
hopefully people have ideas to pitch in as well.
Yeah, exactly. We're also open to this becoming like a much larger and ongoing conversation, right? Classics.
Absolutely. And I think it should be an ongoing conversation because unfortunately the reality is that a lot of these high school and middle school Latin programs are getting cut, and so we have to find other ways and new ways to really keep this field alive for the secondary education level.
Yeah, and again, it's just always by stealth, kind of sneaky, but it's not like we have a nefarious purpose or something. We're just wanting to
We're
to
just
bring
trying to take over the world with
information.
classics majors.
Yeah, exactly. Right. We're just wanting to bring information and perspective that,
Yeah.
enlarge the scope of things that people can think about and know about, right?
Yes, for sure.
Yeah. Well, hopefully, if there are other contributions to this conversation, maybe we could start like a Twitter hashtag or something like Latin by stealth or classics by stealth, and we can continue this conversation indefinitely. So I guess we
Absolutely.
can wrap it up there, and hopefully we'll speak to you again soon. And thank you to Cambridge University Press for giving us this opportunity to talk about one aspect of Latin teaching or classics teaching and DEI that may be helpful to an increasing number of people.
Thank you.